Hey everyone, happy Monday. A lot to be excited about on this week's edition of Ask Mike. Arkansas recently took that win over LSU. They had us on our toes for sure, don't you think, Mike?
Always better to do this show coming off a win
True.
than a loss. And yeah, it was kind of like sitting on pins and needles.
Yeah.
I really didn't think they were going to win, but then we'll find out later on
Yeah,
why
we'll get
they
to
lost.
we'll get to the
Why
discussion
LSU
about
lost.
that. All right, we got a lot of questions to get to, so let's just start off with Linda Roberts, Mike, who wants to know, I saw your prediction that Arkansas would beat LSU, but did you really believe that? I sometimes think y'all make those game day predictions just so you won't make fans mad.
Now, you know that we don't do that.
No.
And in fact, if we could go back and bring up these predictions, which we can't, but you would see that there have been plenty of times in the past when all of us have picked Arkansas to lose. I think I've only picked Arkansas to lose a couple of games this year, Georgia for sure. I think there was another one somewhere along the line. But no, we don't pick Arkansas to win when they think they're going to lose, mainly because there's a competition here.
Exactly.
We keep score on this, and I'm in the lead, by the way.
I have a big fat 0.
I've got 3, I think, and I'm hoping it holds up. And I think if I win, you guys should buy me dinner.
Is that right?
All of you should get together and take me somewhere nice.
I liked our tradition last year where you got to wear the suit that had all the Razorbacks on it. No, not a fan of that?
No, I don't like that one.
But
so no, we don't fake these things. Now,
No.
look, I did predict Arkansas to beat LSU by 10, and that turned out to be dead wrong. I made the same mistake I think the coaches made. Now, I'm basing this on what the on-air guys said during the telecast. They said they had talked to Sam Pittman, and that he had said that the coaches on Arkansas staff generally felt like that this special defense that LSU had come up with, and I guess one of their analysts had been working on it, but he didn't ever tell Ed Ogeron about it, and then he decided during the open date week before Alabama, it'd be a good time to see if they would do it, and Ogeron's like, the guy's wacky anyway right now.
Got nothing to lose.
And so he went, yeah, we'll do that. And it worked so well that I guess they decided to do it again. Now, Arkansas's coaches, according to the on-air announcers, had generally believed that was done for the Alabama game and they wouldn't do it again. And that's sort of what I thought. And that defense ended up being what caused all the problems.
Yeah.
Because it was, there was a lot of disguising going on, there was movements and different things like that, and it put a lot of extra pressure on KJ Jefferson. Apparently the defense itself is designed to confuse RPO quarterbacks. They've already got a lot of stuff they're looking at, and this throws more stuff into the mix, and it confuses them, and Jefferson did look confused in the first half, but he came back and played better in the second half. But that's what I didn't see.
Yeah.
And that's what made it close. However, what I did see, and one of the reasons I picked the 10-point win was because I knew they were going to play this Garrett Nussmeier character, this freshman, whose daddy is the quarterback's coach of the Cowboys. And apparently, according to Ed Ogeron, he called him up on the phone and said, hey, I think it's time my son played. And Ed, who's just in la-la land these days, went, okay, I'm gone after 2 more games, so yeah, we'll do that. And that ended up costing them. That was a mistake. So that's why I thought Arkansas would win that game, even though it was closer than I thought it would be.
Well, so it's interesting, when we talked with the LSU staff, the offensive coordinator, Pete, brought up that phone call situation, and he's like, that's just not at all how it happened.
So that's
he said that essentially what happened was they obviously talked to parents all the time. It wasn't like Nussmeier's dad was like, put my son on the field or else.
Well, then blame Ed Ogeron for saying it like that.
I know. Yeah, exactly. It was put out there in the wrong way.
Nobody would know anything about it if he didn't keep his mouth shut.
Yeah.
But he's the one that said it. And the way he put it out there, it made it sound like the guy just calls him up and says, it's time for my son to play now.
Exactly.
And Ed goes, okay, yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, we'll do that.
But by the way.
This is a lesson, by the way, in why ADs, if they're going to fire a coach before the end of the year, should go ahead and tell him to take a hike. Pay him, get him out of there, put an interim in there.
Good.
Because you get weird things going on if you keep him there. It's also a good reason, in my opinion, for athletic directors not to fire coaches until the end of the year, and don't tell them you're going to fire them.
Yeah.
You just let them coach to the end of the year normally, and then at the end of the year you go, you're out. Why they have to start this early? I guess they think they have to start the process, and they want the word out there that we're looking for a coach or whatever.
Maybe.
But if you could be a little more disciplined, and you could have a plan in place. and just wait until the game's over, and then you're out. Now we're looking for a new coach, rather than all this garbage you go through when you. And look at Gary Patterson at TCU. They told him he was out, and he said, but they wanted him to stay, and he said, "No, I'm gone. Give me my money. I'm gone.
I'm out.
Leave.
I don't blame him.
I'm not going to coach here after I'm gone. After I'm not coaching here after this year. It's stupid.
Side note.
Stupid.
Still think that's a mistake for TCU.
Oh,
but
a big mistake.
Well, we'll leave it at that. All right, at Mousetown says, you really went after LSU's head coach for playing 2 QBs against Arkansas. Why was that a dumb idea?
Well, it wasn't a dumb idea to play 2 quarterbacks, although I generally don't favor that either for obvious reasons. But sometimes coaches play two quarterbacks because one is better in a certain situation than another, and that's not necessarily terrible. What the problem was, what we just talked about, where you basically admit, even though apparently they now say that's not what happened, that's the way Ed Ogeron described it,
right.
was the daddy interfered and he went, okay, we'll play him. But the real issue is you had, in Max Johnson, one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC. The guy was like 3rd in touchdown passes, maybe 4th or something in passing yards. He was in the top tier of SEC quarterbacks. And you took him with 22 touchdown passes, and you threw this thing wide open, and you ended up benching Max Johnson for most of the game. He was in for 2 possessions. And you put this rookie out there that had 1 touchdown pass and had played very little. And he looked all right the first couple of series, and then he just slowly went downhill. And he threw 2 picks. One of them cost him the game. It was a bad decision where Monteric Brown had this wide receiver just sort of backed into a corner of the end zone where he completely covered up, and Nussmeier threw it to him anyway, and it went right to Monteric, and he picked the pass. And once he caught that pass, the game was over, because with Arkansas's field goal kicker, he could turn around on the next play when Arkansas got the ball and kick the field goal right off the bat.
Yeah.
So it ended up costing them the game, and it just shouldn't have been done. You should have played your quarterback, Max Johnson. He's one of the better quarterbacks in the league, and if you're not having a good season, it's not because of him.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. All right, Lanny has our next question. It says, talk about the halftime adjustments against LSU. Whatever Briles decided seemed to work.
Obviously I'm not in that locker room, so I don't know what all they did. It didn't look like to me they changed the play calling much at all. They still did in the second half a lot of what they did in the first half, which was, to me, they went laterally too much. They're throwing out there, they're running out on the edges. LSU's very fast. They were crowding the line of scrimmage. You just weren't having any success getting around those guys. All you do when you go out on the corners, you get away from your blockers so they can just really come across the line of scrimmage and make tackles for a loss. What the difference in the 2 halves to me was just KJ. Now maybe Kendall Briles talked to him and said, this is what you need to do. But KJ took over the game in the second half, and it's not like he had an amazing half statistically. But what he did was he just said, okay, you're not going to sack me anymore. I'm just not going to be sacked. And there were 4 or 5 times when he should have gone down, including the play where he threw the touchdown pass to Dominic Johnson. And so he just used his foot speed, his quickness to elude these guys, and that's what made the difference. So I don't know that it's so much of an adjustment as just one player, the quarterback, went through the first half, saw what they were doing, and went, okay, I'm done
with that now.
I'm not going to deal with that anymore. I'm going to figure out a way to beat it. And he beat it largely with his feet.
It was really impressive to see him just like twirl himself out of some of those situations. It was pretty crazy.
He's just done so much. That was amazing.
Big guy, hard to take down for sure. All right, Blood Red Hog asks, are we really one failed 2-point conversion from playing for the West lead next week against Alabama? It's hard to believe what Pittman has accomplished.
And of course now it's this week. That question was posted last week. We could go back and look at that play, and yes, that was big. Nobody knew at the time how big it was. But don't give up just yet, because I've got a scenario in which Arkansas might still figure out a way to do that.
Okay.
And so let's take a look at it. First, let's say that Arkansas beats Alabama and Missouri. Arkansas ends up 5-3 in the West. Okay. Alabama loses to Arkansas and to Auburn in the Iron Bowl and ends up 5-3 in the West. Auburn beats South Carolina and beats Alabama in the Iron Bowl and ends up 5-3 in the West. Ole Miss beats Vandy but loses to Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl and ends up 5-3 in the West.
I see where we're going with this.
Mississippi State beats Ole Miss in the Egg Bowl and ends up 5-3 in the West. A&M beats LSU and ends up 5-3 in the West. If all of that happens, we end up with this, a 6-way tie for first place. So imagine how bizarre that would be. All of those teams you see up on the screen would be a tie for first place, all with 5-3 records, and then LSU would be at the bottom, 7th. There'd just be this huge gap between first. You drop all the way down to 7th. Now, that's probably not going to happen. So what's the practical side of this? And by the way, if that happened, Auburn would go.
Okay.
So let's talk about what Arkansas would have to do. Auburn would have to be out of the picture. They got to lose. So you take them out of the mix. But they would have to lose to South Carolina. But if they beat Alabama, then you drop Alabama. If Arkansas beats Alabama, you drop them to 3 losses. If Arkansas gets in one of those scenarios, there's 2 or 3 of them in which they can go. But the more practical part of this is, and this is what you really need to look for this weekend, you have to hope that Arkansas beats Alabama. Probably not going to happen, but it is possible. And then they would have to win the next week against Mizzou. But the game to look at then would be the next week, the season-ending Egg Bowl. Because if Mississippi State, if the Pirate beats Lane Kiffin.
You got to say it like you will.
Will Wayne Kiffin. If that happens, then Arkansas would end up tied for second.
Okay.
With either 2 teams or 3 teams, but that would be amazing. And that's a much more practical goal right now. You think about going all the way from where they were 2 years ago to 2 straight years dead last in the West, then moved up a little bit last year, and then they could move all the way up to second. That would be amazing.
Incredible.
I do think they've got a chance to finish third and an outside chance at second and a really, 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 really outside chance at tied for first.
It'll be interesting. I'm sure, listening to Pittman today, I have to say, like, it's always funny hearing coaches before they play Alabama. It's like you got to rally your team up, and they're doing well, so we'll see if they can carry that momentum in.
He was basically saying all the things, how hard it is to beat these guys, and all the guys that he tried to recruit at Georgia, and they ended up at Alabama, and I know this guy, and he's really good. But he kept saying, look, I mean, if you get on the plane thinking you can't win, and he said, we've all been there as players.
Absolutely.
He said, you've been in a situation where you got on a plane or a bus or whatever, even high school guys thinking, we're not going to win this game, let's just get it over with. And he said, we can't let that happen this weekend. We have to make these players go to Alabama thinking we have a chance to win. And I do. Alabama's been unpredictable.
Yep.
They've been unpredictable on both sides of the ball. They've had a lot of injuries. And if A&M beat them.
I was about to bring it up,
And Arkansas beat A&M, so they've got a shot. It's just they're going to have to play really well, and Alabama's going to have to give them some help.
They're going to have to play better than they did against LSU, that's for sure. All right, Razor Boo says KJ is a baller and continues to improve each week. Why do the announcers continue to treat him like he's just lucky, and he even calls plays? What is his ceiling before he hangs up his Razorback jersey for the last time?
I don't know. Have you noticed that? I haven't noticed announcers acting like KJ's a goofball, like he doesn't know what he's doing.
I don't think so. I will say, what was it, the Ole Miss game where everyone was just Matt Corral this, Matt Corral that? That's a little bit different.
That's more of an ignoring of Jefferson.
Right.
I haven't seen anyone sort of act like he's goofy and dumb or something, doesn't know how to call plays, because the opposite of that is true. We've just talked about the adjustments he's made. That's been the big surprise to me with KJ. First of all, again, he's an RPO quarterback, which means every play he's got to make decisions. Then you throw in the SEC and all the stuff we've seen, including what LSU was doing and what Alabama may do. Alabama may copy that defense now and say, hey, it worked for LSU, it might work for us. So, but the thing that's amazed me is the way KJ, he's very football savvy. I think he picks this stuff up a lot quicker than people thought he would. Certainly I did. And so again, I haven't noticed that disrespect, but I will tell you that the guy has surprised me. He's been unusually adaptable to different situations, and you can't get to where Arkansas is right now, as good as the competition is in the SEC West. And then you've already played Alabama.
Yeah.
Georgia on the other side. the schedule that they played and where he's got them right now, and I don't want to even think about this, but if he wasn't here, if he got hurt or something, you would see the difference. This team would be nowhere without him.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we talked with Kendall Briles earlier last week, I guess, and he was just raving about KJ Jefferson and how far he's come, especially in preparation. And you know which game he said was the one week where he wasn't really proud of KJ's performance? Was obviously that Auburn game, and he said that the lead up to that game just wasn't normal for him, and he just kind of snapped out of it and has been a lot better since.
That's interesting.
Yeah. All right. Stu says Pittman talks a lot about shells and spiders. Can you explain?
Okay, the shells would be your helmets and shoulder pads.
Right.
And what you do there is that's typically done in the first part of the fall practice when it's hot and you're worried about the players not totally being in shape. You don't, and it's even required, I think, by the NCAA for the first 2 or 3 practices. You want to get them out there and get them acclimated. So they're not wearing their full jerseys. They're not wearing pads with pants, which heats your body up.
Absolutely.
So you've essentially got T-shirts on, athletic type T-shirts on underneath your shoulder pads, and you're wearing shorts. And so it cools you off.
Yeah.
So that's shells.
That's part of it, yeah.
Which also means T-shirts and shorts underneath the shoulder pads. Now the spider is it's a kind of a training device that we've seen in some of these workouts. If you've watched some of this video we put up, it's a big circular thing, and it's got like padding in the middle, and it's made out of PVC pipe type material on the edge. It's rigid, and the players get on opposite sides of it and they push against each other, and it helps you simulate tackling and blocking without physically hurting each other. It tends to eliminate injuries while allowing you as coaches to work more on fundamentals like blocking and tackling. So that's called a spider. So shells and spiders would typically be a workout where you're not going to hit somebody. So therefore you just got the shoulder pads and the helmet, you're not full pads, you're not going to go whamming, running into each other because you're going to be using the spider.
You're not just beating each other up during practice.
Right.
All right, to basketball. We have Pork Soda, who will love this guy. He always writes in for you, Mike. Says, after the Mercer game, Musselman said he was not going to rotate 9 guys again. He said he was going to move to an 8-man rotation. Seems like last year he settled on a 7-man rotation. So why do you think, or who do you think, will be the odd man out?
You know, if you just looked at the last game in which he played like 8 guys, 12, 13 minutes or more, then you could go and pick the guys that didn't play that much and say, okay, these are the guys that are likely to be kind of not in the rotation, the regular rotation. They would be on the bench more this year. And that would be Kamani Johnson, the Arkansas Little Rock transfer. It would be Jackson Robinson, I think he's from A&M, and then even KK Robinson. Now, look, I think that would be incorrect to assume that. Here's what I'm going to say. What I believe is that there is so much talent on this team that you're going to see. I understand that he's probably not going to play 10 guys in a game.
No.
But I think what you will see is that 7 or 8-man rotation will vary game to game. Musselman is really big on how somebody practices the week of a game.
Yeah.
So you may see guys get into the rotation based on they had a really good week of practice. And then also he's big on sort of trying to figure out who matches up better against an opponent. If you're playing Tennessee as opposed to Alabama or something like that, some players might match up better than others. So again, I don't think you're going to see a permanent 3 or 4 odd men out situation. I think what you're going to see, and my phone is going off over in the corner and I can't do anything about it.
We're just going to let it go.
You're going to, I think you're going to see that rotation change from game to game, and you're not going to have guys permanently stuck over there on the bench out of the rotation.
Because the main thing is that team has so much depth this season, which I think it was the first season Musselman was here was one of the biggest issues for that team. So definitely a good problem to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, diehard Razorback fan wants to know, in all your years covering Razorback athletics, do you remember a female athlete in any sport with a height and athleticism combination like 24 on the women's basketball team?
You know, Jersey Wolfenbarger is who you're talking about. And physically, yes. You don't find too many 6'5", 6'6" guard types with those skills. However, don't get too carried away, because it doesn't matter who you are or how imposing you are if you're a freshman and you're in the best basketball conference in women's basketball. Now look, through 3 games, she's averaging 8.5 points, 4 rebounds a game, and 1 assist. And against number 2 UConn yesterday, she didn't score at all. She had 4 rebounds and 1 assist. No, she did not score. 4 rebounds, no assists, 1 block, 1 steal, 1 turnover. The point is, you're going to have to allow her to grow into this game.
Yeah.
She's not going to come out and just start dominating from the beginning. So she is an amazing athlete. There's no question probably by the time this year is over, we're going to see some really good things out of her. But I want fans to be patient with her and not get it in their head, oh, wow, this is the greatest Arkansas women's basketball player ever, and she should already be there. Yeah. Because everybody has to be allowed. I think sometimes fans just don't understand the competition level in a conference like the SEC. Right. When you're playing some of the best teams out there, and they've got veteran players that are pretty good. They might not have your athleticism, but they've got experience that you don't have, and so it takes time.
It's way different. We're going to drop back to football now for a little bit. Oklahog says, discuss Dow Loggins and his coaching this fall.
Okay, Dow Loggins. Tight ends coach. Some people would say, wait a minute, the tight ends haven't made much of a contribution this year. I'm not sure that has anything to do with Dow Loggins. Yeah. I think it tends to be Kendall Briles, the offensive coordinator, and maybe even more than that, KJ, because KJ is the one that decides who to throw the ball to. Now, we saw, for instance, in the opening drive, we saw a really nice pass to Blake Kern, and it's one of the things that set up that opening field goal against LSU. But then they just didn't go back to it, and then later on it was more, you're working with other receivers and trying to get the ball to them. So I don't know if that has anything to do with Dow Loggins. Dow Loggins is up in the booth, at least the last time I saw he was. And he's sort of Kendall Briles, because Briles is a rare offensive coordinator that's down on the field. He likes to be able to talk to his players. So he's got Dow Loggins up there because he's been an offensive coordinator and a play caller in the NFL. He's got him up there as his eyes, and they're talking together on the headsets. Because he's doing that, and because of certain things that Sam Pittman has said, there's a general belief that if and when, and there'll come a time when Kendall Briles leaves, either become a head coach or whatever, that Dow Loggins is the replacement. Now, nobody's actually written that in stone, but there's just things that have been said that sort of indicate that. So he might be your offensive coordinator of the future, and it's going to be interesting. If he gets into that position, is he going to continue to run this offense that Kendall Briles? Has he been sold on it, or would he want his own offense? I don't know. But he's certainly learning it and working with Kendall Briles with it, and maybe that would be one of the selling points if Briles left, is you've got a seamless transition because you've got a guy that's been up in the booth working with the offensive coordinator when he leaves to just keep running the same system.
It would make sense.
And the other thing about Dow Loggins is he's a heck of a recruiter so far. Now in the NFL you don't recruit, so some people questioned that even when he got the job, but he's done a really good job. They've already gotten commitments from 2 really good 4-star tight ends, so he's a good recruiter. Here's the thing that Sam Pittman likes about Dow Loggins. He was a walk-on at Arkansas back during the Matt Jones years. 5'3" 5'4" quarterback. He had a 6'6" quarterback and one that was about more than a foot shorter. But he was really smart. And I can tell you that they used to have these voluntary summer workouts that are totally different from now. Now you can't go over there and watch those things. They're restricted. But in those days, you could go. They didn't do them on campus. They'd go over to like Fayetteville High School. And they, University of Arkansas can't tell me that I can't go to Fayetteville High School. Fayetteville High School might, but they couldn't, and they didn't. So I'd go watch those things, film them, or shoot the video of them, and then interview guys after they would do 7-on-7. And Dow Loggins would be the coach.
I love it.
He's over there talking with Matt Jones, telling him what to run next. So you knew good and well that Houston Nutt had probably sent him over there going, hey, do this, and that.
This is what you need to
then come back and tell me what he did. So that was all real interesting, but Dow's a really smart guy. He goes way back in terms of the brain power of being a quarterback, about offenses and all that. There's a lot of chatter on Hogville. Oh, we don't want this guy as our offensive coordinator. Oh, I hope if it happens, it's not him. And that's strictly because when he was in the NFL, he had a series of jobs at teams that weren't winning. And it's real simple. In the NFL, if you don't have players, you're not going to win. I don't care how good a coach you are. So it's not my impression that Dow Loggins doesn't know how to call plays. It's my impression that he was the offensive coordinator with some bad teams. And really teams specifically that weren't very good offensively. So, you know, the only way you're ever going to know what kind of play caller he's going to be at Arkansas is for it to happen. And if Sam Pittman decides he can do it, I'd go with it. I think it will probably work out.
All right, PG Hog 1 says, we sure need a good crowd at the Mizzou game. If you ever communicate with Hunter Yurchek, will you see if he has any plans of opening up the student section to the general public? We need Razorback Stadium rocking that day. The more people in the seats, the better.
I don't think there's any way you can force that issue. I don't think that's going to be the problem for the day after Thanksgiving. The students are going to be there or they're not. I don't think you go out and say, hey, how many student tickets, can you go out and sell your tickets to a fan or whatever. I think the real issue is not going to be those seats in the student section that aren't filled because certain students go home for Thanksgiving. I think it's going to be fans that either have tickets and don't show up or fans that just don't buy tickets. Now here's the unpleasant reality of this situation. Extremely important game. He's absolutely right. You need a big crowd. You need, you know, that game, the Missouri game, could be the difference between going to some dreadful bowl that nobody wants to see or a really good bowl in Florida or whatever. So it's an important game. How do you translate that to some Razorback fan that is sitting there thinking, it's Missouri. What's their record here? It's not very good. I wrote it down here somewhere. 5-5 overall and 2-4 in the SEC. So this is not like some Auburn coming in here and you know, second place in the West or whatever. This is a team really down in the East that struggled this year, and in spite of the fact that the SEC tried its dead level best to turn this into a rivalry game, the average fan is not going, man, I got to go to that Missouri game because I hate those guys. You want to beat them, but not bad enough to go to the game if you kind of don't want to go to the game. So I think there are going to be issues like this. You've got tickets, but you're going out of town for Thanksgiving weekend, and you're not going to stay. You just watch the game on TV. There'll be people that do that.
Absolutely.
So I don't think there's a lot the athletic department can do. I think this just has to be the fans. They have to understand how important this, and the students the same thing. Would you stay through that first game, through the early game? Have we had time for that yet?
It was announced today. I want to say it's an afternoon game.
So if you stay through that game and then go and wait and leave, that would be good. How many of them will do that? How many of them will just leave? I don't know. That's one of the reasons why the Missouri game got moved to Little Rock. Was because there was a problem with students leaving for Thanksgiving, and you had this big hole in the student section. But you can't create that by just saying, okay, tickets are now open up to the fans for the student section, because you can't. There's no demand for them.
There's still going to be open seats.
If you have seats open in the rest of the stadium, what good does it open up those seats? So I will sit here and say I think maybe 60,000. Hope it's 60,000. Could it be 55?
It's like,
I don't know. And if that happens, you have to hope the Razorbacks take care of business and win the game anyway.
And that's what I think. It's just, again, it's not the rivalry that I feel like the SEC
and you can't
tries
tell
to
fans,
indicate.
even if the game's important to Arkansas, you can't make them think Missouri is like a big-time opponent this year, not like some of the others they've played. Missouri's probably better than Texas, but you can't convince the fans back then Texas was huge. Oh, this is a big thing. We're all going to the game. We'll fill it up. And now there's no way they're going to approach the Missouri game like that.
All right, Penn Hog says, I've seen some bowl predictions where Arkansas plays Penn State. Many of my friends here in Pennsylvania are diehard Penn State fans. Has Arkansas ever played Penn State in football, and if so, who won? Taking that question one step further, What is Arkansas's record against Big Ten schools in football?
You might not want to take this answer and show it to your Big Ten friends, your Penn State fan friends in Pennsylvania, because it's kind of embarrassing.
Oh, gosh.
Arkansas first met a Big Ten school in 1912. Wisconsin won that game, ouch, 64-7 in Madison.
Oof.
13 years later, the Hogs traveled to Iowa City, where they were shut out 26-0. Let's jump all the way forward to 1981. Da-da-da-da-da. Northwestern traveled to Little Rock, where Lou Holtz's Hogs won the game, 38-7. In 1998 in Orlando, Houston Nuts Hogs faced Michigan in the Florida Citrus Bowl. Clint Sterner versus Tom Brady. And the Wolverines prevailed. Tom Brady never loses, 45-31. In 2002, the Hogs faced Minnesota in the Music City Bowl. Arkansas had the early lead, but Matt Jones had a bad second half, and the Golden Gophers won 29-14. Woo. And finally, for the second time in school history, the Hogs faced Wisconsin. That one was in Orlando at the Capital One Bowl. Closer score than in 1912, but Brett Bielema's Badgers won at 17-14 over a team quarterbacked by Casey Dick and Mitch Mustang. They both played in that game. And by the way, Arkansas did play Rutgers, which is a Big Ten school right now, but they played them in 2013, which was Brett Bielema's first year, and they were still in the Big East. So that doesn't qualify as playing a Big Ten opponent. So Arkansas has only won one. I think they're 1-5 against the Big Ten.
So I was about to say, did they ever play Penn State?
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
Didn't play Penn State.
So that would be interesting then. All right. Alex for Hogs 88 says, you'll have to go back a ways for this one, but what are some of your favorite wins and memories versus Alabama? The 2010 game was awesome, but oh, the heartbreak.
The best one had to be the 95 game in Tuscaloosa. That was Barry Lunny Jr. throwing to J.J. Metters on, I think there were 6 seconds left of the game, and Metters caught the ball on the goal line, got his hands under the ball. Alabama fans to this day will tell you that it was not a catch. But I've looked at it and looked at it. Metters has said he looked at it. Yeah. He got his hands under the ball. It was a legal catch. It was a touchdown. And it was the first Arkansas win over Alabama as an SEC school. So that was big. Yeah. That was fun. And they also came back 2 years later and beat them again in Tuscaloosa. So the first 2 wins against Alabama in the SEC were in Tuscaloosa. That was back in the days before Nick Saban.
Yeah.
Ever since Nick Saban has been there, no, you haven't been able to beat Alabama. Memories of Alabama, though, are different maybe from game. And then I'll also mention the game in Fayetteville in 2006. That was a Mitch Mustang quarterback game where he played really bad. Joe Kynes was the defensive coordinator for Alabama in that game. Now, he had been the defensive coordinator at Arkansas before, under Jack Crow, and was the interim head coach when Crow got fired. I knew him really well. Great guy, super guy. And he then, years later, is the defensive coordinator at Alabama. And I talked to him after the game. And Mustang threw a couple of interceptions. Alabama should have won the game. They missed some field goals. But in overtime, Mitch was supposed to throw. The play was designed up for him to throw the ball to Damian Williams. Instead, he threw it to Ben Cleveland, who was a little bit behind Damian because he was open. And there was a spot about that wide that he had to throw it through. It was a perfect pass. Ooh. And they ended up winning the game, and that's the last time they beat Alabama. Yeah. Now, that game is notable, again, because Joe Kynes told me that he said, we had that kid, he said, anytime you got a true freshman, you try to get in his head.
Oh, I'm sure.
And he said, we had all kinds of things that we designed to mess with his mind, and he said, it worked. We had him. We thought we had him beaten, and he said he got into overtime and made that play, and there's not anything you can do about it when a kid throws a pass like that. Yeah. So those 2 games are the ones that I remember. Now, memories of Tuscaloosa, I don't know. That's a crazy place, right? Yeah. Here's one of the strangest things about Tuscaloosa. The first time I ever went to Bryant-Denny Stadium. You know where I'm going with this?
No.
Just outside the south end zone. You know what's there?
What?
A cemetery.
Oh, that's a little bit awkward.
Who puts a cemetery next to why would you build your football? I don't know when the decision was made, probably like 1904 or something like that, where you got this green something cemetery out here, and you go, oh, put our football stadium right
next to it.
Now, what are you doing there? Are you trying to scare the opponents? Like,
Maybe.
oh boy, we killed people and put them in this cemetery. I don't know what the process was, but that's just bizarre.
It is a little
to have that cemetery
interesting.
just on the other side of a little street, on the outside of the, I think it's the south end zone. However, if you go around over to the other side of the stadium, there's something really cool. They've got this big giant walkway. It's like a 20-foot wide sidewalk, I guess, for game days where fans can walk. And they've got bronze statues of all their great coaches.
That's cool.
And Arkansas needs to do that.
I like
they really
that.
do. Because they got Bear Bryant and all these other coaches, and they're all right there, all in a row.
That's
and
really
the coolest
neat.
thing, because I went up and examined it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, it's cool. Nick Saban in bronze, wearing Nikes.
Oh, of course.
I mean, you're sitting there looking at and all these other coaches are dressed in suits and all this stuff and you know, street shoes or whatever. And you're looking at Nick Saban and he's got kind of warm-up type looking things on.
Yeah.
And he's got these Nikes in bronze. He's got the big Nike swoosh.
That's great.
It's pretty cool. But
You would probably have yours on if you were
absolutely.
a
I
bronze
probably
statue.
did when I was there.
Yeah.
Probably wearing Nikes.
All right, finally, Whippersnapper actually looks like he has a question for me. He asked Tara, do you know if ESPN does something to your voice? You sound like you have a deeper tone of voice every time you work games for the SEC network. That's funny because everyone really kind of goes through that voice training, I think, in this business a little bit, and they essentially work with you about how your tone should be presented. And
so I want
everyone has their own kind of like TV voice. Like Alyssa has a TV voice. I think you don't really have a TV voice.
I think when you do this show from now on, you should be deeper.
I'm just gonna keep talking.
You should
like
sound
this.
like a 40-year-old female sportscaster. I've been around the block. I have a deeper voice.
Yeah.
Instead of bouncy
Well,
Tara.
that's the thing. It's like, you know, you want people to take you seriously, and a high pitch, my normal voice doesn't really always
So in a
convey
game,
that.
when you're on the sidelines in a game, you have to lower your voice.
Yes, exactly.
But they're not doing
Makes
it.
me more serious.
They're not altering it electronically.
No one's.
They're just telling you to do it.
No, we're not doing like a T-Pain, auto-tune situation going on there. All right, that's going to do it for this week's edition of Ask Mike, everyone. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you back here next Monday.